Talk about a split screen. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris spent the second to last weekend before the election zeroing in on Latino voters, now the largest minority bloc in the country, voting bloc.
On one side of the screen was Trump's sold-out rally Sunday at Madison Square Garden in New York City, the candidate's hometown. Social media erupted after comedian Tony Hinchcliffe delivered these remarks. Let's watch.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay, all right. Okay, we're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody.
The comment drew backlash from high-profile Puerto Ricans, including Bad Bunny, who has 45 million followers. He responded by posting a video of Kamala Harris. Let's watch.
I will never forget what Donald Trump did and what he did not do when Puerto Rico needed a caring and a competent leader. He abandoned the island, tried to block aid after back-to-back devastating hurricanes, and offered nothing more than paper towels and insults.
Jennifer Lopez posted the same video, including her endorsement of the VP, as did Ricky Martin and Ariana Grande. Meanwhile, Harris's campaign in Pennsylvania on Sunday targeted Latino voters. Let's watch.
We will win because here's how I think about it. When you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. And this election is about two extremely different visions for our nation. One, Donald Trump's, who is focused on the past and himself. And we are not going back.
Pennsylvania's Latino-eligible voter population has more than doubled since 2000, from 206,000 people to 620,000 in 2023, according to U.S. Census Bureau figures. And Puerto Ricans representing a majority in critical cities like Allentown. Here to discuss further is Melissa Mark Viverito, the former Speaker of the New York City Council. Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Sure, so let's just start with this. What do you think the reaction has been to this joke from Tony Hinchcliffe? I saw some Puerto Ricans who attended the rally saying they weren't bothered by it. Obviously, others have found it to be incredibly offensive. What impact do you expect that this will have on the Puerto Rican voting population?
Look, it's obviously viral, right? This is going throughout Puerto Rican communities across the country, in key battleground states in particular, right? We got to understand that, as mentioned, right, 400,000 Puerto Ricans live in Pennsylvania. You have over 1 million Puerto Ricans who live in Florida. You have 200,000 Puerto Ricans who are in Texas. And like that, there are communities of Puerto Ricans across this country that are in critical swing states and important communities, right? So it's offensive. We have an understanding as Puerto Ricans historically that we have been tested upon, we have been dehumanized in many ways. This is a part and parcel of us being a colony of the United States. But you couldn't find a bigger contrast yesterday, right? Where Puerto Rico was on the lips of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And you have one party in terms of the MAGA Republicans that embrace a rhetoric that is dehumanizing. And then you have a presidential candidate on the Democratic side who, yes, no candidate is perfect, and many people may not agree 100%, but it is a candidate we know is being genuine and sincere in reaching out and wanting to develop a partnership and a collaboration with a community that she knows is critically important. So I think that was an incredible stark contrast, and the level of offensiveness, right, that happened as a result of this is galvanizing many of us and galvanizing the artistic community. Someone like a Bad Bunny who probably would not have weighed in otherwise, but when it comes to the dignity and respect of a people, he said enough is enough, and he stepped up and he posted the video on his Instagram account for 45 million. I think that this is definitely something that for those folks who maybe were thinking twice about going out to vote, who maybe were not as enthusiastic, it would generate that level of engagement in terms of going out and actually voting. But we don't know, and I have a hard time believing that those people who have committed to vote for Trump would be dissuaded to vote for him. I think those are people that are very much stuck in. This is fascism, this is authoritarianism, and this is something that is, to me, very much a cult behavior. And people are very much, digging in when it comes to voting. So we'll see, and it's hard to gauge that behavior. But I think for people that were thinking maybe of just sitting it out and not as enthusiastic, this definitely has mobilized many of us to engage more deeply.
Melissa, it's interesting because it does seem like we've been waiting for this October surprise, and this is an incredibly large voting block in a swing state like Pennsylvania. Some of this voting block is a product of a displacement that happened because of Hurricane Maria, and they're the diaspora. But they're also not all Democrats. So I'm wondering if you could help us understand just how, because I think, the media, frankly, sometimes generalizes that all Latino voters are the same and all Puerto Ricans are the same. But, there are conservative Puerto Ricans, and Donald Trump, his campaign had enlisted a reggaeton artist who's very conservative in Pennsylvania about a month ago. So is it going to be like a uniform reaction? And how much does Donald Trump's previous actions in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria play into this?
Look, I think you're correct, right? No one community is monolithic. And I think that when you talk about the Puerto Rican community, you can't just talk about us in the diaspora. You have to also talk about the politics that are happening in the island and on the island right now, where we have a historic election happening also on November 5th. We have a very strong conservative movement in Puerto Rico. They've actually formed their own party, and they have been able to vote in one election cycle maybe 4 representatives into the Puerto Rican legislature. And their support is growing in this election cycle, not to the point where they're going to be able to assume the governorship, for instance, but the gubernatorial candidate in Puerto Rico that represents the conservative statehood party, because it is a conservative party, is a MAGA Republican who tried to distance herself from the comments yesterday by basically trying to say it's only the comedian's point of view. That's not the point of view of the Trump administration or the Trump campaign, when we know for a fact that you have to go through several layers of vetting in order to even get up on that stage. So these are comments that are fully embraced by the campaign of Donald Trump, but yet this governor's candidate in Puerto Rico is still holding strong with her support for Donald Trump. So speaking of the Puerto Rican community, there are going to be those elements, but still the overwhelming support is for Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, right? And so that is true. And there's issues that move the community, as a recent poll that was done by Hispanic Federation and Latino Victory demonstrated, that came out a couple of weeks ago or last week, that people care about obviously economic issues, but that within that, the Latinos, there is 70 to 72% overwhelming support, right, for Kamala Harris. So that's there, but we obviously want to continue to strengthen that engagement and participation. So yes, we're not monolithic. Yes, there is a strong fundamentalist, conservative element within the Latino community and in the Puerto Rican community as well. And there are those who are, unfortunately, and embarrassingly supporting Donald Trump, despite all the harm he has done to Puerto Rico, not only in his words, but in his actions in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria.
I wanted to ask you a question about the joke itself, because I think there is a misinterpretation going on where people was assuming he was referring to the people of Puerto Rico or Puerto Rico itself as trash. But we do know that for a long time, Puerto Rico has had an actual trash problem, right? I mean, in 2017, NPR ran the headline, "Puerto Rico struggles under the weight of its own garbage." Global Press Journal, "Trash crisis leaves Puerto Rico near the brink." And in 2016, before the hurricane, PBS wrote, "Puerto Rico struggles as trash piles up." Doesn't it seem more likely that that was the intent of the joke?
No, absolutely not. I think that, when we talk about racism and when we talk about the dehumanization of a people, those are sometimes, those are deep-rooted sentiments that are being manifested, right, and projected. And so there is always been this element as a colonized people that we are seen as the other, that we are seen as less than and then become the quote butt of jokes, right? That's not acceptable. There is no way that this can be justified. And there was a galvanizing moment years ago when I first moved to the United States and to New York City, when Seinfeld did a moment where they burned the Puerto Rican flag, and that rallied people to such an extent. There is a basic dignity, right, that you just don't cross the line with. And there is no way of justifying what was said or trying to parse it or to say, oh, people can't take a joke. No, because there is that element of dehumanization that is at the root of it, and that somehow we can justify, and somehow we can find a way of laughing at it, and somehow we're taking things too seriously, and that the victimized continue to be the ones that are oppressed. That's what's happening here. There's no way of accepting this. We won't accept it. And the fact that people are stepping up, even outside of our community, to stand with us is demonstrating that we are valued members. Humanity is a valued sentiment and a very important value to hold, and we're not going to accept that from from a campaign and a former administration that all it sought to do was to hurt Latinos, to hurt our immigrant brothers and sisters, to dehumanize us as Puerto Ricans. That's just no way of being able to find any. There's no room for me to find a way to justify what was said yesterday. That's just not acceptable.
Real quick, Melissa, we're about to wrap, but I just wanted to note and get your reaction. So this comedian was supposed to have some shows on the island of Puerto Rico coming up that were canceled, but there's also some hypocrisy in that a lot of Trump's donors and biggest supporters, like John Paulson, who's being floated as the Treasury Secretary, and Jake Paul and Logan Paul, who live on the island of Puerto Rico, are taking part in a Trump-backed tax incentive program called Act 22. It's a loophole. So they've been moving to the island, the same island that they're calling an island of garbage. So just quick reaction, we got to wrap, but want to give you a chance to respond to that.
No, I mean, I found it interesting, right, that on the eve when he's going to have these 3 or 4 shows in Puerto Rico, he decides to go on this bigoted tirade, right, against the Puerto Rican people. I've never heard of this so-called comedian. I don't know who his audience is. I don't know who his audience could potentially be in Puerto Rico, if not for maybe those that are coming and displacing local Puerto Ricans through this tax incentive. But yes, it is a big problem. And unfortunately, in the rollout that was done yesterday by the campaign of candidate Kamala Harris, there was no discussion of the Fiscal Control Board, for instance, that has caused a lot of economic harm to Puerto Rico. And that, again, the issue of colonization is at the root of a lot of the challenges that we have as an island. And that has to be addressed. And that is not seriously being addressed. So we're hoping with the change in administration in Puerto Rico and the change in administration here that we can make some further progress.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. We appreciate you joining us today on Rising.
Thank you.